want everyone to have a chance to ask your questions. And this is Chantal. She's going to be our moderator, so you can queue up and she'll invite you. You can ask your questions so everyone can hear it from the mic. And we will do our best to answer your questions. But okay, thanks.
Okay, who would like to ask the first question?
Come on, someone's going to ask a question.
Takers? Okay.
The society, I'm new to this as well. So.
Can you turn to the mic so we can see the society?
Well, no, I mean,
I'll try to catch it.
I'm new. I just have a simple question.
Just so everyone. Take care of your friends. Okay.
Does money exist in this ideal world?
Who's got the music playing? Can we?
What was the question?
Does money exist in this ideal world?
In a resource-based economy.
Yeah.
No, nope.
It's not it.
Oh. No, okay. No, it actually doesn't. The whole objective of a resource-based economy is to move away from a monetary type of society that promotes scarcity and is driven by profits. Because when you're driven by profits, you're motivated to have scarcity. And when you're motivated to have scarcity, you're also motivated to retard advanced technologies or anything that would otherwise make an existing profitable model obsolete. So in our type of resource-based economy, there is no place for money. It seems very difficult to understand how that could possibly be, but it is very well possible. And I'll just go off a little bit more on a tangent, but something as I was explaining to someone else earlier. If you think about money and how that we all think it's impossible to live without, go back 10,000 years ago, before we had totalitarian agriculture, before we knew how to do agriculture and farming, and try and sell the concept of money onto tribalistic, nomadic people, you know, that moved from one part to the other to go to wherever the food was. Try and get them to start carrying around gold coins or whatever you want to use as a medium of exchange, i.e. money, and get them to understand and appreciate the concept of money. The time and the place for money at that point of civilization didn't exist. But once we created agriculture and we were able to kind of sit in one spot, if you will, we were able to create cities. And we were able to create more of a surplus than what we actually needed. And then, you know, we started barter trading, but then someone came up with the idea of money to facilitate, you know, advanced trading. And so the more that we were able to trade with money, the more we were able to advance our society at that point in time. So we have gotten, though, with the use of money, we've advanced technology to a point today, whereas, well, if you think about it, something as simple as your wireless telephone, once you've built the hardware, put the stations on the buildings and everything, what's the cost of the call? It's nothing, you know, it doesn't cost a thing, maybe a little bit of maintenance or something else like that. But you see what's happened in the evolution of civilization, if you will, from tribalistic to agricultural to technology, there was times and places when money worked. Money didn't work in the beginning. It worked in this intermediate stage, but we're now ready to go to the next one because technology has liberated us from the need to do jobs and for the need to exchange goods when we can produce everything that we need for free. Why do you need money? So,
Sorry, just
I
what
know
about medicine? Is that when people get sick, how, I don't know, how does medicine, how does that?
It's irregardless of the commodity, it's the service. So think broader. If you think of THX 1138, Spielberg's first flick, everybody was allotted so many credits. The whole point of that was at the end, THX 1138, who's the main character, breaks through. And as he's breaking through, all his credits go down to zilch. So the whole concept of worth, whether it be self-worth or worth of commodity or service. You see what, it's a very hard concept to grasp, is the concept of true worth. ethics, there is no true word. There is only good or service.
But it's just medicine today costs so much. Would we go back to using,
A lot of medicines, like John talks about, operations, they can be done by machine now. And you can see now like where machines are do better operations than doctors. So you can see like a heart transplant being done just like anything else, like on the conveyor belt. And so a lot of the things like you were talking about, like scanners, instead of going to the doctor and the doctor like looking at your skin rash and saying, okay, I studied and that looks like this disease and we're going to do tests. Instead you would go and something would actually scan your arm and it would say, you probably have one of these two viruses. And then from there it would make decisions. So I don't know if that's touching a little bit on your question, how medicine will be practiced, or if you're asking how medicine will be distributed.
Updated with.
Exactly.
What's kept from.
Does that answer? Yeah, yeah. Good. Does that answer your question a little bit, or was it a different question about medicine? Good.
I can even expand a little bit more on that as well. I think exactly what, okay, come on. Exactly what Miko's saying there is that machines would lend their favor to a job that is actually technical in process, if you will. And a lot of reasons why a lot of jobs exist today is because we prevent the technology from coming out. We have the sophistication to put your arm under a scanner, scan it, and then take that information that was just scanned and match it against all the types of skin disorders that we have, speaking just of dermatology. We don't release this technology because what happens then? The dermatologist becomes obsolete. And in our type of environment, we need to create a job that keeps a person on a hamster wheel, like a dermatologist, just to perpetuate this insidiously silly, system. But I mean, you can take it a little further. There are certain circumstances where, people would, still need to be there to work. Like going down the medicine path, well, what about medical research? How do we get a machine to do that? Well, we don't. But aren't they naturally curious? I don't believe necessarily that the method of invention is necessarily need. Sometimes it's just we enjoy doing research. There's plenty of people out there that, may not be me. I don't have any interest really in studying skin disorders, but I bet there are people out there that would just do it or would gravitate towards that field. So even things like research, where we couldn't get a machine to take care of that, and it does need a human interface to do. I believe firmly that if you freed up all people, there would be enough of the population that would still go to that just for the gratification of providing a service to humanitarian and just feeling good about that.
And just to add on to that, a lot of the greatest innovations we've had in society, from people like Tesla or the Wright brothers or Einstein, have come from non-materialistic, non-monetary motivations. They've done it for the process of problem solving and to make the world better. So I think there would always be enough people that would want to jump into those fields and invent.
So I would like to say that people all over the world do volunteer work all the time where they don't get paid any money whatsoever. So if it helps you grasp it better, think of all the jobs in the future as being volunteer work.
Okay.
From what you know, how do you see a transition happening? I can think of a scenario where, okay, everybody's informed, populations across the world, all around the world are informed. How do they see, how does Jacques Fresco see it happening? Our government's going to cave in and use tax money to suddenly build Fresco-type homes and communities? Our corporations, what does he think is going to happen once people get involved? More informed.
That's an excellent question. And really there is no one significant answer to it, or one specific answer to it. I think think, or we think, I think the way it would go is it really depends. If we got to the point in time where everybody bought into it, like the population was demanding it, so much so that the government and media and the establishment capitulated to saying, okay, fine, you people want it, we're going to do it. Then I think what we could do is we could get the population to buy into the interim sacrifices that might need, or the adjustment period. And I think the way we would see it happening is that we would, let's take inventory of the resources on the planet, and let's try and pick the first seed, if you will, of where we would build a city from the ground up. It would be easier, resource-wise, if we didn't go and reinvent an existing or rehab an existing city, but we picked a spot, that was ideal on all accounts to be the first, let's say, fresco-sponsored city. Whereas we started underneath with all of the infrastructure that goes under a city, the sewers, the utilities and everything, and then we're built up, and then the circles around as far as, going up. So I think if we got the people to buy into it, it wouldn't be too hard. I mean, look at Dubai. Came up out of the sand, out of nowhere, in just 10, 12 years' time. Go ahead. What I'm using Dubai as an example is look at how much we built where there was nothing. So what we would be building is frescoes, instead of spending all the money stupid on empty office spaces. Dubai is not an example of a fresco city. I think we all agree to that, But what Dubai is an example of is the capabilities we have. The world's tallest building was built there in 5 years' time. Imagine if those resources were instead deployed towards a fresco-orientated city. And we did it in the middle of the dumbest spot ever, in a desert. My God, duh. What we would be doing really is take inventory of the resources, look on the planet, try and find the best place. We start the first city from the ground up there. We learn from mistakes and trying it there, because you learn every time you do something. Then we'll do it again in the next best location, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. We get better at it as we went along, but that's one way. There is no for sure answer about how we would do it.
The cities starting simultaneously, or people saying, let's say you have a wealthy group in one area and say, no, we're not going to wait for you, we're just going to start it here. We have enough money to fund this.
I think we would take the approach, again, first we figure out the resources, then we figure out where is the greatest benefit for the humanitarian, benefit of it. That's where we'll start the first one, wherever the greatest benefit for the people would be. And then we would just outline that, look, everybody, it's going to take us this long to build the first one of these. This is a 50-year plan, okay, but we're going to change the way we live. Years 1 through 5, we build the first city here. Here's the plan where we feel it produces the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to put the next one here, and then to put the next one here, and here, and here, and so forth. Much, I hate to say it, but in the same way that any corporation that comes out with a new business idea, it first says, where can we get the biggest bang for our buck? But instead of us thinking the biggest bang for our buck, where can we get the greatest benefit for the most people would be the first city. And then we would, through that practice there, we decide where do we build the next one. And eventually, we would re-engineer the entire world this way. So it's a process.
Also, the city would preferably be built in an impoverished area with little development such as South America or Africa. And the city itself wouldn't actually be a resource-based economy, but it would be so efficient that it would slowly wear out the market system to a point where you could no longer rationalize the use of money, and thus a resource-based economy would be achieved.
Aren't they starting with New Zealand?
No, that was...
No, where?
There have been a lot of people who are very excited about the idea of build it and it'll just work, and build it and we'll just prove to everybody that we'll build our city and it's a cool idea. And that's why Dylan wanted to play that clip from Jock addressing the fact that if you try to separate yourself and build a city to isolate and live in, because you don't want to like deal with the rest of the problems, that the monetary system has a limit, and there's a sixth of the planet's living in deprivation already. So if that was to spread, and the trends show that it does spread, that your happy little city will get invaded at some point when everyone else is hurting bad enough. So he doesn't talk about it in terms of us go build it and go live there just to get away from all the problems and show that it'll work. He's talking about building a test site. But the other reason is value system. And the example he'll use is, say you take New York City, current day. If you were to find an indigenous person on an island that's been remote from industrialized society, they don't know about a city, they don't know about a car, they don't know about oil. You drop them in New York, they're not going to know what to do. Their value system is not going to be adjusted to live in the way people in a current city does. So if you take all of us with the way that this is how we survive. We have a value system that we grew up with. If you just drop us in a resource-based economy city, it doesn't mean anything, because we're not going to know. We have to change our value system first before we can make a city like that work. But I don't think we'll be the ones that do it. Go ahead, Sean.
There's a question.
Yeah, it's just that I can't imagine like a group or even just a town of laid off, unemployed people just waiting for somebody to come up with the ideal city. I would see them now be wanting to go to those countries or to an empty land and start something out of desperation. It's,
Out of desperation, or
out of, because they don't have jobs, out of no other
well, let's
alternatives.
I hate to use this example again, but how is Dubai built? Out of desperation and exploitation, So all the people that, are built Dubai in the desert there came from Pakistan, India, and were shipped in, and they sleep in little tent cities in the worst of conditions and everything else like that. So if you could offer to the people that volunteered to go there, to build it, to live in it, oh, we'd have a line way out the door. So it wouldn't be hard. The funny thing is the way I see it is just my opinion, the first city would actually have to be paid for out of money. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. How could we get the resources there? I mean, after we did the survey and the resources, we surveyed the planet, we said, that's the best spot where there's nothing to put the best city, because logistically, to be able to build it, it's the most efficient spot and logical place to put it. But to be real, 99.999% of the planet is still working on a monetary basis. This is whereas if we got the people up to demanding it, and the people said, we want our tax dollars spent this way, the first city would be paid for, the cities would be paid for it. It would be a while until we could actually migrate from a monetary to a pure.
Sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to comment. Did the Soviets try something similar in their decentralization system, how they basically went off from like Kazakhstan and then Eastern Mongolia, and they started to build these satellite cities, and some of them were totally technological, and I'm trying to remember.
But I don't think it's even remotely to assessing the entire planet's resources and the entire planet agreeing and working in concert to start a new, type of society. But you see, we were just theorizing that everybody bought into it. So we're beyond there's a war argument. We want to do it now. We're at the stage where everybody agrees to let's do it, theoretically.
All right. Peter, hang on a second. Just to finish her question, your question was the transition question. And I think that this is an uncomfortable thing to say, because people think it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. We think we're going to wake up tomorrow and have some sort of altruistic, benevolent revelation that we all have to start taking care of everybody on the planet is equal and get rid of stratification. If you don't do that, it's not going to be easy. You're going to fight to the end. People are going to fight for what they know how to live for. And if you grew up in overseas, in a different country, you have a different value system. We live in a system that is so identified with the me, you know, that as soon as, you know, we fight against each other to survive, I have to go compete in a marketplace to outdo everybody else so I can get a job, you know. So that line of thinking is what keeps us all fighting with each other. It's not going to be, there's no easy transition. But a matter of fact, as this said very plainly in the films, if you do nothing, the outcome is guaranteed. Okay, if you do nothing and everything seems to be going okay for you, fine. But without enough critical mass, and enough people thinking about these problems, and you're going to get what you're going to get.
I want to give others a chance to say something, but that's exactly my point. I mean, you're never going to get that place where everybody's going to agree.
All right, it's not.
And giving the corporate analogy, it's like organic produce or organic markets. Somebody just has to start it independently until everybody catches on. And it takes 10, 20 years until they get the consciousness that this is better. And I feel like maybe there are just some people who are not going to wait. They're going to start trying to have a city.
That's okay, they can do that, and they're going to see how it turns out. Go for it. I mean,
I just want to say, Jacques says this is not the Jacques Fresco city, you know, you need to move beyond Jacques.
Yeah, we can't have a 100% consensus and wait for that to happen.
no, it's not about enough consensus. But to answer your question about it'll never happen, I just want to say a year ago, this would never happen. All you people here for the Zeitgeist movement a year ago would not happen. It didn't exist. So that's what I have to say for
I have a question.
Go ahead, it's you.
Can you guys educate me more about interest rate and who's the first people who came up with this idea of interest rate and how it started taking over? And right now I see Greece is being destroyed because of the interest rate, and we have a big collapse 2007, 2008. How we get rid of interest rate and what will be like alternative?
That's a great question. I have a book in my office called History of Interest Rates, and it goes all the way back to pre-biblical times. And interest rates have come and gone out of societies, you know, and even you heard about time, I hate to say this, but you know, when Jesus was in the market square, the only time Jesus ever got pissed off, I guess, is when he threw out all the usuries, you know, or they called them usuries back then. Usury is a term for lending and everything, because what he was saying was the whole lending principle on interest was evil, which is why a lot of the Muslim beliefs you cannot charge interest on them. I was actually a private banker in Geneva, Switzerland earlier in my career, and we used to have certain hedge funds and investments for the Islamic population that we sold that were separate from the rest of the world because they didn't have any interest on them. So there's even today in modern society, we have small pockets that don't charge interest. Well, so it's moved in and out with different times, and it's moved in and out with different cultures. And historically, interest rates have been far lower than what they have been across all societies than the last 40, 50 years. Interest rates generally...
Just a little footnote. Biblically, it was 4% was the maximum interest. It was considered thus usury to charge above that. It was righteous to charge that at maximum.
That's correct.
And today, 4% is like, wow, that's a gift.
That's right. That's what I mean by the last 40, 50 years, interest rates have been historically exceptionally high. If you go back, you'll see that they never really got above 6, generally speaking. A couple of anomalies, but very infrequently. And 4%, I would say, is probably about the average to high average of what interest rates. I don't know if it's necessarily due to inflation, but this is true in any major developed westernized country that we have a history. Dutch, Spain, Portugal. I mean, these are areas where we have interest rates going all the way back to the 1100s recorded. You know, it's really been that way. But to answer your question about, I guess, modern day interest rates and what can we do to eradicate interest rates, we could get rid of them tomorrow. You know, I mean, if you think about it, the whole monetary system really still works in principle. You know, it's the application of interest, like, you know, Peter Joseph says in Zeitgeist Addendum, that is so insidious. And by having the application of interest, you have by mathematical default the built-in of bankruptcies, and that's the real. So we could still get by, you know, and not have interest. It's called the gold standard, you know. But you know, I mean, gold is interesting and everything else like that, and you guys can probably tell I work in money and in finance, and I spend a lot of time on money. But I don't think gold is the answer. All right, we're not going to go back to carrying gold. It's just, again, go back to my model. We're beyond money now. Technology is the currency of the future, you know. So we can't get rid of interest.
I just have one other note on interest rates. It's artificially set, and this is the problem of it. We think about the free markets here, but the Fed sets the interest rate, so they often set it too high or too low, and we end up getting these boom-bust economic cycles that wreak havoc on the average people. So just with the concept of the interest rate, if there was a free market kind of floating thing where the two separate parties could agree on it, that would be one thing. But when you have humans, you know, fallible and do the error setting what the interest rate should be, that just creates all kinds of issues with our economy.
Chantal, behind you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you want to ask your question now?
A couple of things. I came in late, I haven't seen the movie, haven't read the books, I'm just getting right into this. Just wondering to what extent you have been influenced or not by historic traditional movements of the same sort, various utopian colonies, like in the United States in the 19th century especially, or modern socialist or anarchist movements. Obviously there's some similarity here. I don't know enough about your movement to say how much, but to what extent is there some influence, and what lessons have you learned that they collectively apparently have not learned, or else we'd have a different society already? That's one question.
Sure. If you're to look at this movement and compare it to anything in the past, look at the civil rights movement, or you look at the women's suffrage movement. You know, there was a struggle to have women the right to vote, to desegregate our society. You know, we had a civil rights movement. It started out as an idea that it was wrong to treat people lesser because of their color, and that took a great struggle. There was no benevolent, benign government that said, "Oh yeah, you're right. We'll just give them the right to be as everyone else, and we'll desegregate." No, it was a popular struggle. So the civil rights movement is more of an adequate metaphor for what we're talking about than some sort of technocracy or anarchist commune or whatever else.
I didn't have too much more to build on that other than to say that we're actually, I would say myself, am not that well educated about what other past movements, you know, have done in the past. So I can't say that I'm really kind of learning off of others. I'm just kind of learning as I go along. You know, I don't know if you guys want to add.
There's a lot to learn.
Oh, you bet there is. And I actually think you could probably speak better to some of the past movements. And we have this recording over here. If there's anything, ideas, one thing that, you know, the whole Zeitgeist tries to, you know, promote is the sharing of ideas and experiences, because I always say anytime I want to be twice as smart, I ask somebody else, because I can't possibly have had their experiences or even perceive something as simple as a bottle in the same way that they would perceive it.
Keep an open mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no right way to doing any of this. There's just a way. Right. So, Shin, I don't know where you want to start. I know this gentleman's been waiting for a while.
I can speak. I personally don't find very much attraction in thinking I'm going to go live on one of these floating cities. I like a garden, I like mountain trails, and that kind of thing. But what's interesting to me is if Zeitgeist has got some kind of program which is at the householder level of how we're going to make a transition. So, for example,
They can't hear you back there. It would be really beneficial if you could say this in the mic.
I think we can hear.
Oh, you're good over there? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So, for example, you've got the green movement now, which is doing really well, and you've got LET's system, which is bartering system.